Hello everyone, welcome back. You're watching Empyrion Galactic Survival episode 137. I'm Enigmius and today we're continuing with the Heracles build, working our way towards the back from the front, which we worked on in the last episode. And this time around, as you can see, one of the goals that I had was I wanted to get some lateral thrusters in place. We're using the really big capital vessel thrusters, and you'll notice I'm putting some little ones around it, and these are purely cosmetic. Believe it or not, we're actually placing these just because it kind of adds a little bit of extra visual interest to the whole assembly with the little blue lights. That's the reason for it. Some people may disagree with choosing to make something that draws power entirely for cosmetic purposes when we've got all of the other larger thrusters there. We could have just taken another one of the larger thrusters really and tacked it on somewhere, and we probably would have got comparable thrust out of it for less power consumption than having 10 of the little guys. But that wasn't really the goal. We weren't looking to optimize thrust or power consumption with the addition of these guys. It's just for the looks. This detailing that I'm doing around them now is for lack of a better word, for no damn good reason. Again, purely cosmetic. I had this idea in my head, a rough idea for something that I wanted to do that would again add to the visual interest of this assembly where all of these thrusters are attached, that didn't necessarily have to make sense relative to the rest of the build. We don't have a lot of round edges on this build. Not surprising, we very rarely use round edges, and that was kind of one of the reasons why I decided to use them, is because we go around and we add a little bit of legitimately round things. Kind of breaks up the angular nature and provides a little bit of visual interest where otherwise it might have been pretty easy to just kind of forget that there was anything there except for the blue lights of the thrusters. When it's all said and done, when this whole assembly is complete, the idea is that this thruster assembly will be a focal point, and by having the great big thrusters plus the little thrusters providing a little bit more in terms of aesthetic details, plus these little round modules basically placed one module per small thruster, kind of that focal point feel to it, if that makes any sense. Other than that, the one thing that's a little bit different this time around compared to a lot of my thruster assemblies is that we're not making an effort to enshroud as much of the thrusters as we can with combat steel, which means that the thrusters will be more vulnerable than they usually are. And I'm okay with that, because realistically speaking, the large thrusters, they have a lot of hit points, and it takes a while to chew through them. If your enemy is going to be attacking your thrusters, realistically speaking, covering them all in combat steel, except for the business end, thrusters this size, it's not really providing as much protection as one might want to think. So I'm not really too concerned about it. You can see, using this chase camera view, we hop into the cockpit and then we use the chase camera view. We can get a much better view of a ship this size. Just because of the way it's set up. It actually will deliberately place the camera as far away as necessary for us to be able to see the entire ship, which I quite like. And it also gives us an opportunity to evaluate how everything is kind of fitting with the different sections of the ship. Otherwise, all we really get a chance to see in any kind of detail is one section at a time. It's a little bit difficult to judge what our next step is going to be, because we can't as easily visualize what the idea we have for that next step is going to do when you compare it next to the other pieces that you've got already present on the ship. So in this case, we've got the thrusters in place, and now the next step is to build that second layer and kind of have it set up in a way. Again, I'm not necessarily looking for it to match a theme elsewhere on the ship, and in this case we would be looking to match the theme on the front section of the ship, because that's the only other section of the ship that we've got done. But at the same time, I don't want it to be wildly different, because then we run into the issue of just looking at something and it's confusing because it doesn't really seem to go together, right? You got all these different pieces and you've got the apples with the oranges and people get upset. It's not a good scene. So in this case, I'm going for a very, very simple kind of 90-degree structure, similar to like what we had above the botanical section of the ship, and kind of splitting when it comes down to the thruster assembly, so that we've got almost like a saddle effect for some reason is what it comes to mind when you just look at it that way. It reminds me of a saddle. I don't know specifically why, but it does. Saddles don't split like that in the middle on the sides, but you get the idea. We get this just kind of a very almost generic sort of shape following around and covering the side and the top of this thing. The one thing that you might notice is that we aren't doing anything on the underside, and that's because we've got all of that detailing, the different texture on that sort of lower flank that you'll probably see a little bit better if you're not familiar with what I mean. The area directly below where we're working has got that initial layer covering the glass core, and we did a little bit of detailing accidentally that I decided that I liked and I wanted to keep, and so we aren't covering that with anything. It does represent a weak point in the ship's defenses. There's nothing really so critical in that specific area that I'm too concerned about it, because you'd still have to chew through a lot of combat steel to get to something where you'd be able to do any real harm to the inside of the ship. Would it be improved if we had an extra layer of defense in that particular area down there? Yes. Yes, functionally it would be improved, but we get to make that decision, and we can decide in favor of optimal defense in every aspect, or we can kind of mix things up and be willing to make certain compromises in certain areas if we feel that we can survive the process. And I'm pretty sure a ship of this size can survive the process, because first of all, the enemy has to recognize that that particular part of the ship is in fact a weak point, and the only way for them to do that is if they'd seen the inside layout of the ship, and being able to recognize where the combat steel is the thinnest, and also what's underneath that combat steel that might be worth trying to damage, so that you would want to work your way through that section and take care of business. So not a lot accomplished in this episode, except for the parts that were accomplished in this episode. It's a very big ship, and I absolutely support the idea other people shared, that speeding it up for the sake of getting more into an episode isn't necessarily producing the best results. So we're going to try and get it back to the somewhat shorter episodes. The goal is in and around the 10-minute department, and maintain the speed at a watchable level. So you can see now we get that beautiful view, and you can see that detailing underneath the thruster assembly, those little ridges all along. Next episode, we're going to continue working towards the back. If you want to be notified about that and future episodes, the easiest way to do that is to subscribe to my channel or follow me on social media. Links for social media are always in the information section below the video. Feel free to leave your comments and feedback. Thanks for watching, guys, and take care.